our Miss Brooks is presented each week to the worldwide facilities of the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service.
We are going to our West Coast reporter, Brooks, to talk about Brooks's Corner. What are you watching?
By the way, we have no idea what she's about to talk about. None of us have been prepped.
I think it's The Bachelor.
Oh, if it is, okay.
I have never seen an episode of The Bachelor.
Oh, then it's not. Yeah, I was going to help you if that was that.
Thank goodness.
No.
I have faith.
Oh, that was James. I forget. Oh.
Right. Yeah, I've never seen an episode. Okay, so I was trying to remind myself what exactly I watched this week. I know that's sad. Not as much. What?
In your defense, this week's been 100 years long.
It has. That is true.
That is true, yeah.
So not as much CNN as I usually watched. Well, I don't usually watch CNN except for like this election period. I've just like been binging on CNN and MSNBC, but mostly CNN. So not as much, just because I needed a little bit of a break from it all. I watched the Raiders win on Sunday. So
Raiders
that was
of the
really
Lost Ark?
exciting.
Oh, we know
Yes.
that one.
The Lost Ark.
Good movie.
So I watched two main things this week. The first one is I binged the latest season of Below Deck, which is one of my all-time favorite shows on Bravo. Yeah, it's a big Bravo show. So I'm assuming you guys have never seen it. So
I thought you were talking Lower Decks.
Yeah, I was gonna
they're the Lower Decks animated Star Trek.
Yeah, listen,
show.
last week when she mentioned Below Deck and you guys were like, oh yeah, we like that Star Trek show, and I forgot to mention that she's not talking about Star Trek.
No, I know what show she's talking about. I know. Because
you said that and I was like, oh, is that something
no,
like
there's a podcast. There's a podcast
haha.
I listen to where they do both The Bachelor and Below Deck. So I know of the second show. I was like, this show sounds
Okay.
like.
Wait, is this a Cody and his brother twins Disney show? Below Decks?
Yes.
No, it's not.
Okay,
That's
so
the one
that's
about
the only other.
the private boat company,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That show is
So there's-
actually pretty wild. Like I definitely watched a couple
Right.
episodes.
So there's two versions of it. There's like Below Deck Med with Captain Lee, and then there's Below Deck with, or maybe it's Below Deck Med is with Captain Sandy. And anyways, the one that I watched was this season, Below Deck.
It was like Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, Chicago
Wait.
Chicago ER. Like
Yeah,
one
is
of
there
those
Below Decks SVU?
No.
Below Decks as me.
Criminal Minds.
And
Below
I know
Decks
there's there's two different versions of it, but this is the one, Captain Sandy. Hannah was the chief stew. They had a chief bosun, or the bosun, not chief, just the bosun.
You gotta explain the naval terms for some of us who are not.
The bosun is like the lead person on deck. And this season it was a woman. So that was really interesting because it was the captain.
Breaking the
Yeah,
ceiling
the
there.
captain was a woman. The chief stew was a woman. The chief stew was the one in charge of the stereo. She's usually female, to be honest. And then the bosun, who's the lead person in charge of the exterior, was a female. So it was like all females in charge. And it was really interesting because there was a lot of
empowering.
Wait,
Yes,
but what about the captain?
Yeah, Captain Sandy. She's a female.
Female, okay. No, the actual
Yeah.
captain, the one that makes sure the boat moves.
Captain Sandy. It's her
All right,
name.
making sure.
And
Okay.
Captain Sandy.
James doesn't believe a woman can do that. So he
James
just had
doesn't
to make
believe
sure.
Apparently.
I'm kidding. You know,
He's like, no, but who's
when the cameras stop rolling, who's actually moving the ship? Who's got the bars on their epaulets?
That's cool.
Yeah.
But she's the captain, but who's driving? What dude is driving
Who's
the
driving the boat? Right. Yeah.
What sea
this is
captain
like-
with one-legged wooden leg?
I feel like this is like a 50-foot yacht or something. It's one of like the biggest yachts
Wow.
on the sea. And it's super interesting to me because it's like, I've been watching it for several seasons and I've been watching like both versions of it, but just seeing all the kind of like behind the scenes stuff that happens like the cabins they have to live in. There's always like relationship drama, like two people always
Okay,
hook
wait a
up.
minute.
There's
This is a
always so
real-
much drama.
This is a real boat, and this isn't like
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
real.
This
Yeah,
is
it's
real
real.
life.
It's a reality
Yeah,
show,
it's like
like
a
Yeah.
reality
a
show.
private boat.
It's like
Yeah.
Real Housewives and all that stuff.
And-
You
and-
actually
Oh.
deal with
And
real
like this
people.
is the crew, and it's like you'll see like there'll be this. It'll be different people,
Like the charter
renting-
guests, different
different guests renting the service every episode, but
Yeah,
like
that I knew.
it's like this drama thing. And
Yeah.
yo,
Yeah.
those
It's
people who
really
work on that boat
interesting.
have more than a little bit of drama,
yeah. I mean, so I'm trying to like imagine and think
and they
about
all fucking each other. Pardon
all
my French.
fucking each other. Yeah, pretty much.
Pardon my French.
And
Yeah, look
they
at
all
Chris,
have
he's like-
It's just
Just
like,
chocolate.
how did I miss this?
And they all have
Bravo,
like
you
relationships
said?
at home.
Family Channel.
They all have relationships at home, but they're all like having sex on the boat, and it's a whole thing. And they always like go out and get drunk, and like all.
I
this
think
drama
they
always
even some of them
happens.
beef on Twitter as the airing of the show reveals certain
Yeah,
infidelity, and then you know,
Yep.
Chris's face.
That's like a whole.
You smash
Wait,
the
wait,
homie
wait.
and they're mad that it comes out
That-
on TV.
That is an amazing whole new level of entertainment to have
Yeah.
the cast of the show you're watching like narrating while you're watching with new things.
Yeah, I've seen that for a couple things. Yeah,
That's cool.
I don't know. It's really interesting. It's also like the whole reality show drama thing that I just like, but it's also really interesting just seeing the behind the scenes of like, you know, being on a super yacht and then seeing the other side where you have the charter guests on a super yacht and how they act. And some of them are like really cool and some of them are huge assholes. They had Johnny Damon's been on a couple of times and he's just like a drunken mess every time he's on.
go
They
Yankees.
Are you a Yankees fan this
Yeah.
season?
I've
Okay,
always
just
been.
checking.
No. I've always been a Yankees fan. You could. That's Keith and Mike would not argue that. Always been since the Civil Air Patrol drill team days.
Okay. Sure, I believe you. So yeah, so I binge watch.
I use fan loosely when I talk about James.
I've been a fan of the Yankees since 1990.
So yeah, so I binge watched that. That was really interesting. But the one show that I did want to talk about was I watched the series premiere or the season, not series, sorry, season premiere of SVU. What is it? Law and Order SVU.
I know that one. That one I have.
Yes. So I watched that and I thought it was really interesting because
the
they
one with the
always
iced
say
tea?
like,
It's one of the iced tea.
yes,
Okay.
iced tea. is in
What
it.
season is that now? They've been on
I don't
forever.
even know.
45,
900 probably.
something like
Yeah.
that.
It's been on for a minute. So
Mhm.
we watched that and it was interesting because they do headline or they do like, you know, their stories like ripped from the headlines.
We're from the
As
headline.
they always say. So they had this black dude in Central Park. He was working out, and a white woman and her kid called the cops on him because the white woman was like, he's scaring my son. He's scaring my son. And it was a whole thing. And then the cops came and they arrested the man because he got the cops called on him. And then he ended up having like 2 warrants out for his arrest, but the warrants were for protesting. And so they weren't like, you know, like big warrants or
Burglary or
whatever.
something. Yes, yes.
Yeah, anything bad. They were just for protesting. And then like he ends up actually like being in NA program, I believe. And so then he like had to get a sponsor involved and it was like, I don't know, it was this whole thing, but he ends up obviously being, let me back up. And so when they arrest him, they find another crime. They happen to find this guy who had been raped and beaten like, you know, 15 yards away. And so they're like, so then they arrest the black dude because they're like, he's being called for being suspicious. And then there's a crime that just happened. And then he has outstanding warrants. So then they're like, everybody's gathering around and then they're interviewing the woman and she's like, I'm not a Karen. He was scaring my son. And, you know, it ended up being really interesting because they talked a lot about bias, especially on the police force, especially on NYPD. And Olivia Benson ended up having to go to internal affairs. She got investigated by internal affairs because she was like she didn't arrest him, but she, I guess, like let it happen because the guy was already getting arrested by the time she got to the scene, but she like let it happen. So she gets investigated, and she has to like check her own bias. And so the show is very, timely in everything that's happening right now. And it's talking about how like NYPD needs to check their bias. And it was really interesting. And I am glad that I watched it because, like I said, it's, ripped from the headlines and all the, it just relates to everything that's happening. And I liked the way they were doing it because there were so many nuances to it that it's like, like you see kind of a lot of the things that like the NYPD has to deal with, but then they like kind of go back and show you a way that they could have done it without it being biased. Like they were like, okay, you ran the black man's background. Did you run the person that called background? Because when you got to the scene of the crime or the scene, there was two people there. So why didn't you run her background? Is it because she was a white woman? And, Olivia's like, I'm not racist. And they're like, well, why didn't you do that? And she's like, I don't know. I just didn't. So it just like shows how, you can operate by what you think is like the book, but then still really operate with a lot of bias.
Well, and that's how it's a scripted show, because they never would have internal investigated themselves.
Right.
Yeah, I just
That's
found it
true.
interesting that there's
Name of the show?
it's Law and Order SVU.
Law and Order SVU.
Yeah, it's one of the Ice-T. I just thought it was interesting. Two things that popped out. One was obviously we know what headlines are ripping it from the guy who was at the Central Park, but
Yeah.
it goes from in real life he was bird watching to he was working out in the park.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting switch on what actually did happen. And the fact that she had her dog and she was manhandling her dog. Now she's just walking around with her son in the park, carefree. Yeah. So again, the lens of this story, it's not really, ripped from the headlines, but it's skewed now to make it seem a little more,
a little more iffy.
Nuanced. Yeah.
Nuanced. And then,
like, to be able to actually, it gave that one side now something to actually kind of argue, because if it was a dog, totally irrational. The actual real life version was totally irrational. So like what they did was texturize it, so they created a space where you could talk about it on both sides. Like like if they use the real one, there's no explaining why. Like, okay, you're choking a dog while you're lying on the phone with the cops. Like like it's like like there's no rationalizing her side.
And then the second point is, did I hear right? You said that during the same area, there was another man got raped, and they're trying to tie it to this guy who was working out at the. Yeah.
So the
I don't know
original
what that
thing
part of that story. Because Olivia
But-
Benson's character is a surviving victim of rape herself.
Right.
Yeah, well,
So-
these shows, what they do is they always layer multiple crimes on top of each other, so they can have a surprise, like, oh, but you didn't know this thing also happened, and now it's just part of the show in that way. They always layer 2 or 3 crimes in there, so while they're investigating the main crime, to give you those twists in the show. That's really all that is.
Yeah.
They do these rip from the headlines one. They've been doing them for years. It's it keeps them able to keep relevant with the show. Yeah.
And I would be interested in seeing like the opposite perspective of like, a person that is like super pro NYPD and thinks defund the police is horrible and all that stuff. I would be interested in like them watching this and getting their thought and take on what happened, and like if it went by the, if they think it went by the books, and like if they think everything was right and there was no racial bias or anything like that.
I'd be interested if it was a black lady and her son in the park, and then some
white dude
with no shirt on who really was working out and who had like all types of tattoos on his body, and then another man did get raped at that park. And how have you spend those events when she's saying, well, I was afraid, I didn't have anything concrete, but something about him was just off. And meanwhile, he just committed this rape against this other man in the park.
I feel like shenanigans that wouldn't
get ratings, that wouldn't get viewership.
Because people won't believe it. I wouldn't believe it. Like she's not gonna stop and call. Like she's just gonna walk away with her son if that's a black woman.
You'd have to create some sort of confrontation between the two.
Intentionally Karening a situation, like
no, but if you create, you could force a situation.
So let's say she's an Asian mom or her kid,
harmed, unless she's being attacked or like the black women aren't generally just gonna walk by a scene like that.
All right, so let me say she's not a black woman. Let's say she's an Asian mom.
Okay.
And the guy was there yelling at her some racist COVID stuff. Meanwhile, he just raped some dude, in the same area of the park. And then the cops give him the benefit of the doubt, and then through all the SVUing, Ice-T probably cracks down the case. He's like, "This mofo did do this stuff. You guys won't believe me." And the rest of the guys on the force is like, "It's Ice-T. I don't know what his real character's name is. It's just him."
I don't remember either.
And then Internal Affairs investigates, and they find out this is all true. And then he watches the cops do the perp walk. Yeah, that'd be more.
Yeah, you guys are putting a lot of faith in the investigation of the cops,
NBC writing. Oh.
Yeah.
But good recommendation.
Yeah.
No. It's always good. I'm not really like a Law and Order watcher. My boyfriend watches it, so that's why we watched it, and it was interesting. It was interesting in the way it's written. I was like, oh, this is why the show has been on for so long, and all of that. But yeah, that's what I watched. I wanted to have something better than Below Deck or like, a Bravo reality show, because really that's what it's either like Bravo reality or sports. That's really
no, this is good. Appreciate it.
Live your truth, yo. Live your truth.
That's right. That's right. The other stuff is us forcing you to watch something.
True. It just doesn't feel right.
Our Miss Brooks is presented each week through the worldwide facilities of the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service.